and let us reaffirm a fundamental truth. All children, born and unborn, are made in the holy image of God.
That was from the State of the Union. Today, President Trump announcing a new rule that will take millions of dollars away from Planned Parenthood. You can no longer take federal funds if your counseling includes any information on where or how to get an abortion. Opponents call it a gag rule, and supporters are cheering the president on. Here now, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, also a Fox News contributor. Governor, welcome. Good to have you with us tonight. You know, obviously there's going to be a lot of pushback on this because it really undercuts a tremendous amount of the federal funding that Planned Parenthood is supported by.
Well, the fact is Planned Parenthood shouldn't be getting a dime of any federal funding. They're the largest abortion provider in the United States. It's abominable what they do. They've been exposed as having sold babies' body parts, which is just unthinkable. The fact is the president has fulfilled yet another promise to protect human life, and I think this is a very important one. I wish Congress would take all funding from Planned Parenthood because it's pretty much a fraud that they provide all these services when the fact is they're pretty much an abortion machine and make a lot of money doing it.
Well, I mean, this is exactly the way to carve out money from Planned Parenthood, because they say they refer, and that business goes to them and to their bottom line ultimately, as you accurately point out. Here's what Nancy Pelosi said. Jay Inslee, also the Washington governor, has also said that several states, 14 I think, are going to get together and try to push back on this legally. She says this outrageous assault on the health care of vulnerable and underserved women and families would choke off their access to affordable contraception, critical health information, and preventative health care, gravely undermining the health and strength of America. So who would fill that role, Governor?
Well, there are a lot of community health centers that can do it. There's enormous numbers of hospitals. But this is such a ridiculous thing for Nancy Pelosi to talk about this as health care. There's nothing healthy about killing a baby. I mean, the baby certainly doesn't come out better on this. And I think it's disingenuous for any of the Democrats, whether it's Jay Inslee of Washington or Nancy Pelosi, to somehow pretend that all that Planned Parenthood is out there to do is to provide contraceptive services and to help women have better health. It's an abortion clinic. That's basically what they do. And most of the other things, even pap smears and mammograms, they don't actually do it at Planned Parenthood. They simply are the middleman, and they refer it to someone else. Why don't we get the middleman out of it and let people get those services? We all think that's a good thing, but let them do it directly from the people providing it, which is not Planned Parenthood.
Obviously, it's going to ignite quite a battle, and as you say, the president promised that he would do this, and he's following through on it. This is an interesting, just take a look at this poll. I mean, this is where the United States is on pro-life and pro-choice. Pro-life, 44%, according to the latest Fox News poll. Pro-choice, 46%. And it really has become, it used to be that there were people of both of these persuasions on both sides. Democrats who were pro-life, Republicans who were pro-choice. That is just not the case anymore. Neither side seems to allow anybody who is not aligning with them on this to be part of their party anymore, Governor.
I think it's going to be a defining issue in the 2020 elections, and if people think that abortion anytime, any place is fine, they'll vote Democrat. If they think we ought to protect human life, especially in the latter stages of pregnancy, they're not going to have a choice. They'll need to vote Republican. It'll come down to that.
Yeah, and a very permissive new law passed in Vermont just this week as well. Governor, thank you. Good to see you as always. Governor Huckabee.
Thank you, Martha.
200 American troops, guess what, are going to stay in Syria as part of a small peacekeeping force, and maybe international troops will join them. As President Trump withdraws forces, they were up at 2,000 to the war-torn country. Senator Lindsey Graham, a critic of the president's policy in Syria when it came to pulling out the troops, says this. She's praising the idea, and he tweets this out. This will ensure ISIS does not return and Iran does not fill the vacuum that would have been left if we completely withdrew. This decision will ensure that we will not repeat the mistakes of Iraq in Syria, and he salutes the president. Here to react is former Michigan GOP Senate candidate himself, Army veteran John James. John, are you happy with the president going from 2,000 said to 0 to 200?
Well, I'm always going to be happy with the president pulling our men and women in harm's way out of harm's way, and also doing so responsibly. I agree. I believe that the 200 that are remaining will keep Turkey out of the Syrian conflict, but will also keep Iran's ambitions at bay. I believe that Iran's ambitions are abetted by Russian aggression and pushing south and allowing Iran to say things like death to America, death to Israel. We need to make sure that we maintain our support of Israel, and that scaling back our presence in the region is done so in a responsible manner.
So moving on to, and we'll see where it goes because the president's going to speak to the Turkish president today. We know what's going to be happening next week. The president's going off to Vietnam to meet with Kim Jong-un. A lot of people simply look at this and say, he hasn't got rid of his nuclear weapons, it's a waste of time. But of all places, the Washington Post breaks down some progress being made. An example, North Korea slowed its weaponization, designing, building, and testing, delivering systems development. It's limited the sophistication and reach of its arsenal, which is a big problem because we thought they could reach our West Coast. And our findings indicate that the latter outweighs the former, and the latter being that they have not, they've expanded their bomb fuel inventory, but they've cut back on these things. So there is some progress being made already. What do you want to see happen when it's all said and done?
There's definitely been progress being made, and it would not have happened without the leadership of this president. I truly believe that these steps have been made, but we cannot expect an immediate thaw of a 75-year Cold War in a matter of 48 months. I believe that we need to make sure we manage our expectations and realize that Kim Jong-un is terrified. He is a hermit dictator who's taking a green and yellow train from Pyongyang to Hanoi, and he's using these nukes as his insurance policy against the West. I believe that President Trump's leadership in getting North Korea to toe the line, to approach the table, and to have verifiable denuclearization in the foreseeable future. I applaud the president for his initiatives, and I'm wishing him the best of luck when he goes to Hanoi.
Best of luck. A lot of people are wishing you, because the word is you're one of the finalists to be the next candidate to be the UN ambassador replacing Nikki Haley. What would that mean to you, John? What do you bring to the table?
It would be incredible, and it's an honor to even be considered. But I'll tell you what. We have plenty of foreign policy experience in Turtle Bay. What we need is more leadership experience in Turtle Bay. I have battle-tested leadership experience. I have business-tested leadership experience. We don't need more resolutions and rhetoric. We need to heal the world by getting people together, accomplishing tough missions, and I bring real-world experience and the ability to be able to be a messenger for America's priorities all over the world and in New York, based upon the pleasure of the president and in the priorities of the Secretary of State as well. If I get the call, I believe that I would serve well and serve honorably, energetically, and effectively.
Real quick, John, have they started background checking you?
Well, I don't know what the federal government is doing on me, but I can assure you that they won't find very much. But it is an honor to be considered, and we've been in talks in the past, and it's an honor to be considered.
I mean, vetting you. They have to vet all their people. I'm not saying that there's any problem in your background, because it's a long process. John James, best of luck.
Thanks a lot.
President Trump says he expects to have a trade summit with his Chinese counterpart very soon. It could herald a breakthrough in the months-long standoff over Chinese trade policies the president has deemed unacceptable. Correspondent Kevin Corke is at the White House to tell us what else the president's saying after this latest meeting at the Oval Office.
Is it more likely that a deal happens or doesn't happen? Speaking for the United States, I would say it's probably more likely that a deal does happen.
In perhaps his most optimistic reading of the talks yet, President Trump this afternoon signaled that the ongoing trade dispute between the U.S. and China could soon be nearing an end.
We want to make this a deal that's going to last for many, many years, and a deal that's going to be good for both countries. But we want to make it meaningful.
Trump's outlook was echoed by China's vice premier, who said a deal is very likely, and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, who announced that the Chinese negotiators who've been here in Washington for several days would extend their visit to build on progress that's been made this week. The Oval Office meeting today comes as the president prepares to meet the leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, whose historic Singapore gathering with the president last year produced a joint statement with the sides agreeing to peaceful relations, the recovery of U.S. troops remains, follow-up talks, and the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. While the latter remains an elusive but ultimate goal, the president has hailed progress, including the cessation of missile testing by Pyongyang. But the news hasn't been all positive. The recently released Worldwide Threat Assessment declared that North Korea is unlikely to completely give up its nuclear weapons and production capability.
Its leaders ultimately view nuclear weapons as critical to regime survival.
Coates is not alone in his skepticism of the North. CIA Director Gina Haspel accused Pyongyang of being committed to developing a long-range nuclear-armed missile that would pose a direct threat to the United States. The stark language from the president's senior intelligence cadre brings into sharp focus the stakes of the upcoming summit, particularly for our partners in the region like Japan and South Korea.
We now have a situation where the relationships are good, where there's been no nuclear testing, no missiles, no rockets. We got our hostages back.
And a possible meeting coming up in March between the president and Xi Jinping.